Hey there. You're listening to True Story No Cap. Real stories, no exaggeration, no lies. Just the raw, unfiltered moments life throws our way. Relax, lean back, and let's get started. Sarah Miller didn't have a particular passion for rural labor, but she didn't let the 600 square meters of her dacha plot irritate her either. She had a compliant nature, especially when it came to the interests of those she loved. Truth be told, the dacha was her mother's hobby, but since Sally adored her mother immensely, she had long learned to find joy in trips to their modest patch of land. It was good that the dacha was located quite close to their home. If you walked light, you could get there in half an hour. And, for example, on summer weekends in the cool morning air, such a walk was even pleasant. However, long treks weren't strictly necessary. Public transport always came to the rescue. An unusually long bus route connecting the railway station with a large factory almost on the very outskirts of the city ran past the dacha community. Such proximity turned out to be quite fortunate, because in a sense the inconspicuous plot had become a true salvation in the past years, which were particularly difficult for the whole country, and for their family in particular. Whether it was a coincidence or the mother's quarrel with the father was a consequence of the events happening, the man filed for divorce. All his numerous relatives, who used to visit them often on occasion and much more frequently without, seemed to have cut off the road to the hospitable apartment of Sarah's family and her grandparents. The girl once overheard the adults talking and understood that her father had not only kept the car and garage for himself, but also craved to snatch a part of other property. But it didn't work out. Both the dacha and the apartment had been allotted to the grandmother, so after the divorce, the greedy former son-in-law didn't get a centimeter. The offended man paid tiny alimony and didn't seek meetings with Sally, erasing her from his life as if he had never had a daughter. The girl was hurt, the pain piercing right through to tears, but the girl understood that her tears would wound the hearts of her loved ones, so she carefully hid her sadness. The family, orphaned before Sarah, her mother, grandmother Eleanor, and grandfather George, had to live on. Visiting the dacha and battling for the harvest became, perhaps, the surest remedies against adversity. On the 600 square meters, they grew potatoes, cucumbers, and carrots. Since there was no car anymore, delivering the harvest home without a bus would have been much more problematic. But this way, they even brought home tomatoes, which didn't always manage to turn red in the meager summer heat. After simple kitchen alchemy, the green fruits turned into a wonderful salad that perfectly enlivened their modest table. Under the guidance of grandmother Eleanor and her mother Sally, still very young in those years, grated the carrots needed for the recipe and hummed a simple song about an evergreen tomato and the magical land of Lamonia. Remembering the past, the woman was amazed by the resilience of the adults in her family. They showed it even in the darkest hours. Soon after Sarah's father divorced her mother, such a sad period set in when there was absolutely no money in the house. The father, along with the crumbs of alimony, disappeared from his daughter's life. A few years after the divorce, the grandmother, grandfather, and mother all worked at the same factory. And there, as if on purpose, salaries were delayed, hopelessly late. After a few months, the money from their modest savings dwindled away. Sally understood that her family was shielding her, trying to protect her from excessive involvement in adult problems. However, it was impossible not to notice that treats from the store almost never appeared on the table, not even her usual cheap sausage that curled up into a bizarre funnel when boiled. Striving to be useful, Sarah ran around familiar corners of the district, collecting bottles in a bag sewn by her grandmother's hands. Then the girl washed the fines, because they paid a little more for clean glass containers at the collection point, and bought bread or other necessities for home. For a short period, there were problems with transport. Buses stopped adhering to the schedule because their number on the route was ruthlessly reduced. As a result, squeezing into the cramped cabin with bags became practically impossible, and Grandfather George fashioned two convenient, clever, and reliable trolleys. The larger bags, the ones with more capacity, the man usually pulled himself. And when for some reason he couldn't go to the dacha, he would always instruct, "Girls, when you walk home from the dacha, don't overload the trolley. Take care not to get bruised." This was immensely touching and tender. The smaller trolley was usually pulled by Sally's mother, and when the load wasn't too heavy, she entrusted it to her daughter. Thus, supporting each other, they overcame all difficulties. By the time she received her passport, Sarah had managed to harbor resentment towards almost the entire male sex, and taking her mother's maiden name, became Miller after her grandfather. He alone was the sole support in their small family. Resourceful, cheerful, with a light humor towards adversity, Grandfather George managed to always do everything and never once reproached his daughter Martha for not saving her marriage with her husband. Sarah had recently often thought about how her parents divorced when her mother was almost the same age as she was now. In some ways, their fates were similar. Sarah's marriage also fell apart, like a house of cards under the waves. However, she and her husband Arthur had no children. At first, by mutual decision, although Sally was already 26, they decided to live for themselves. Then, somehow abruptly, Arthur became engrossed in the pursuit of success, and it happened that he, successful and driven, was snatched up by a colleague of his, equally energetic and tenacious. 3 years of calm and outwardly prosperous marriage proved powerless against a passionate infatuation. However, Sarah did not consider this turn of fate a tragedy. Almost 2 years had passed since the quite civilized divorce, and perhaps not even a faint shadow of regret remained. Sally's mother had a much harder time. A child, although approaching the difficult age of adolescence, had to be raised, clothed, and fed, and the times were turbulent. Although things were tough then, Sarah's memories of the first 15 years of her life still mostly had a taste of light sadness. After all, Grandfather George and Grandmother Eleanor were there. Their family coped with troubles together. Now, the financial burden was lighter, and Sally felt immense sorrow that they didn't live to see that both their daughter and granddaughter were living quite comfortably, that they were living very well. However, sometimes it seemed to her, especially at the dacha, that both grandmother and grandfather were very near. As if any moment now, from somewhere around the corner of the little house, grandmother's gentle voice would be heard. "Sally, run here. The raspberries are ripe. Come and taste." Or grandfather would enter the gate with a smile, looking like a victor, showing off fish strung on a stringer and asking his wife, daughter, and granddaughter, "What shall I serve for dinner today, my dear ladies? Shall I make fish soup, or would you prefer fried fish?" Ah, how many pleasant things were associated with the dacha. Now, the dacha had lost its role as a food granary. The potato patch had shrunk to a few bushes, just enough to traditionally eat young boiled tubers with dill, giving way to flowers. Of course, there was still space for tomatoes and cucumbers, but mostly the main harvest now consisted of fruits and berries. However, the most important thing remained that on the small plot, where probably every handful of soil was familiar, peace was easily found, intertwined with a light sadness. Sally's mother also enjoyed going to the dacha, but for 2 weeks now, the woman, at her daughter's insistence, had gone to a sanatorium. The hardships she had faced in her youth had taken their toll. Yesterday, on the phone, her mother asked her to pick berries, water the beds, and weed the surely overgrown grass. And Sarah, without hesitation, dedicated the second half of Wednesday to this task. She left work early, thankfully there was nothing urgent, and set off. Sarah collected the currants, did a little weeding around the cultivated plants, watered the beds, and filled the containers. Tired, she had the bun she had brought with her, made some berry drink, the best remedy, dwarfing any sweet drinks, for combating heat and fatigue. She lay down for a short while and unexpectedly dozed off. Sarah's awakening was abrupt. The transition from summer twilight to the velvet of night is, of course, a wonderful moment, but only if you have time to truly enjoy it. This luxury was unavailable to her. The smartphone screen mockingly informed her that she had to hurry, otherwise the last bus towards home would leave without her. In that case, she would either have to walk home at such a late hour, or spend the night at the dacha and rush home on the morning bus, leaving the harvested crop behind, and fly to work on the wings of duty. Sarah hastily packed the harvested crop into her bag and hurried to the bus stop. Hurrying, the woman saw a thin girl sitting on a flower bed made in a huge tire near one of the plots along the line and walked past. Sarah took a few steps, but a vague premonition stopped her from going further. A child of primary school age had no place on the street alone. Sarah had known the Thompsons, the owners of that plot, since they acquired it, so she could say with certainty that she had never seen this little girl with them. Of course, the girl could have been brought as a guest and was just out for a walk, but the dark voids of the Thompsons' house windows left no doubt. The house was empty. Either everyone was asleep there, having forgotten about the little guest who had gone for a walk. The second assumption was clearly absurd. Therefore, she was unlikely to be related to the owners of the plot she had settled near. Even in the dim light of the street lamps driving away the darkness from the dacha community, The girl's pitiful appearance indicated that she was in trouble. Of course, Sarah felt anxious. Perhaps this seemingly chance encounter was part of a fraudulent scheme. Just recently, on her way from work, she had read a story online about a man who, due to his soft-heartedness, almost got into trouble and only by a miracle escaped a trap set by criminals. No, definitely not. The woman decisively dismissed the suspicion of the girl's involvement in fraud. Of course, the possibility of a criminal trail to her appearance in the Dasha community remained, and Sarah's sensitive heart literally screamed, "This little stranger needs help." Mentally reproaching herself for excessive curiosity and interfering in other people's affairs, the woman turned and asked, "Are you waiting for someone, or are you lost?" The girl flinched and spoke rapidly. "Excuse me, but I need help. I got on the bus, there were a lot of people, I wanted to pay for the fare, but my wallet wasn't in my bag. My school pass was in there, and money. Even my phone was stolen. It's just a simple button phone, but it's still annoying. I tried to explain to the conductor that it was probably stolen, that everything remotely valuable was taken from me. She got angry and told me to walk. So I walked, turned into the Dhaka community to wait out the heat. I tried asking for money, but no one gave any." Sarah sat down next to the girl on the tire and clarified, "Where do you need to go?" Judging by the address the girl gave, she needed to take the bus heading towards the city center, just like Sarah herself. The woman didn't hesitate for long and commanded, "Then let's go quickly, I'll pay for your ticket." The girl was immensely happy, and taking the bag of berries from Sarah to help, didn't stop thanking her on the way to the stop. Soon the woman and the girl were sitting in the stuffy cabin, and the stranger asked, "Could you please dictate your phone number to me? I'll remember it and return everything later." Sarah looked closely at her companion. Her initial assumption that she was about 7 years old was wrong. By her thoughtfulness and way of speaking, she was clearly older. Sarah smiled. "Don't worry, I won't go broke from one ticket. By the way, what's your name?" The girl introduced herself. "Olga, Emmy." "Very nice to meet you. And I'm Sarah." "Well, now we've met. Listen, maybe you should let your family know you're all right. Are you going home?" Emmy's face clouded over and she confessed, "Thank you, but I don't remember my mom's phone number by heart." The woman noticed that her companion, apparently tired from the day's worries, kept drifting off to sleep and then surfacing from its grip, and offered her shoulder. "Don't be shy. Rest. I'll wake you up before your stop." The girl, suppressing a yawn, asked again, "Do you have to go even further?" Sarah nodded. She didn't want to make the girl feel awkward by explaining that she had decided to escort her all the way home and hand her over to her relatives. The neighborhood Emmy was heading to was too questionable, even if it was in the center. Old houses, sunk into the ground, stood next to rising high-rises, and residents, according to media reports, were being relocated to more desirable areas. City dwellers, of course, understood that the former inhabitants of the center were literally pushed to the very outskirts, and the most defiant were even pressured into unfavorable moves by supposedly accidental adverse circumstances. Wooden houses regularly burst into flames like matches, clearing the way for developers with minimal costs. Sometimes driving past, Sarah noticed that many buildings were empty, or most likely, served as shelters for antisocial elements and hooligans. Of course, she was anxious, but wandering the streets of this neighborhood alone at such a late hour was extremely unwise. Emmy leaned trustingly against her unexpected patroness's shoulder. Driving past her own stop, Sarah sighed, realizing that she wouldn't be getting home anytime soon because of her kind impulse, and, sending her mother a text message wishing her good night, she sank into thoughts about everything and nothing. Thoughts about work were replaced by reflections on the need to arrange her personal life, and then moved on to musings about how, with the established heat, the plants at the Dacha would struggle by Friday. Finally, the bus brought Sarah and Emily to the right stop, and after a short walk down the almost unlit street, the girl stopped at a dilapidated house. The girl hadn't even had time to get out her key when the door flew open. A woman in a stretched-out tank top and tight cycling shorts came out onto the threshold and started yelling, "What are you doing, Emily? Where's the money your father gave you? I called him and I know you left him, and I thought you'd run off after hitting the jackpot. I was going to report you missing." Thin children appeared from behind the screaming woman, a girl about Emmy's age, a boy a little younger, and a tiny little girl who was crawling after the older ones. Emmy began to stammeringly tell the story of the situation she had found herself in, and Sarah froze, unable to utter a word or move from the spot. The The stunned woman wanted to turn around and leave. Astonishment seemed to have rooted her feet to the ground. The lady scolding Emmy was perfectly familiar to Sarah. It was her former best friend and now sworn enemy, Lisa Grant. Many years ago, she had separated Sarah from David, her first strong love. Now, with the wisdom of years, the woman understood that she shouldn't have confided all her personal secrets to Lisa. But back then, not yet 16, she believed in the inviolability of friendship and was also too shy to discuss such delicate topics with her mother and grandmother. Lisa learned from Sarah herself that David was insisting on intimacy, arguing that they would definitely get married as soon as his beloved girl turned 18. So what difference did it make when they became intimate? Sally was almost agreeable. The boy's arguments seemed convincing, and the girl was ready to forget about all the moral principles her older relatives had instilled in her. She constantly hummed to herself or sang aloud a naive popular song about a plane in love, because the words of that simple hit so accurately told her story. "I love you, David," Sally repeated after the vocalist again and again. The girl wanted the boy to have no doubt about her feelings. The only obstacle was her desire to make the first time something special and her too long preparation for such an important moment. But it turned out that while she was doubting and planning, Lisa was acting. As a result, slightly embarrassed, David, who had come for a date, announced to Sarah that he was leaving her. "Understand, it's not about you. You're a wonderful person, and you'll definitely find your happiness." He said something else along those lines, but the girl seemed not to hear him, and then she turned around and rushed away, not noticing the puddles under her feet. Naturally, Sarah rushed to Lisa with her sorrow, hoping for support and perhaps even advice on how to get the guy back. But instead of sympathy, she heard the cruel, merciless truth. "Sally, David and I are together now. It just happened that I'm expecting his baby. Don't be upset, okay?" After such an announcement, it was as if all of Sarah's upbringing evaporated. She would later hardly be able, even if she wanted to recall a tenth of what she unleashed on her friend, who had instantly become an ex-friend. However, simply forgetting those who stabbed her in the back, like a terrible nightmare, that was all she dreamed of. Fortunately, David's father was a military man. Thanks to this, the betrayers didn't linger in front of Sally for long with a noticeable belly on a normally slender figure. Lisa followed the guy, who became her legal husband. Sarah went on living, trying not to remember the arrogant betrayer and the wicked friend. For a long time, she stayed away from men. With the fairer sex, besides her mother and grandmother, she communicated dryly and strictly on business. Sarah calculated 15 years had passed since that bitter year of 1997 for her. That was how long she hadn't seen either Lisa or David, and deliberately steered the conversation away when any mutual acquaintances started talking about them. Lisa's mother, Aunt Kate, once accidentally met Sally on the street and tried to talk to her. However, the proud girl said she was in a hurry. Aunt Kate later, according to rumors, went to live with her daughter, but Sarah didn't care, as long as she never saw or heard from the betrayers again. The girl suffered, keeping everything inside, and only her future husband Arthur managed to melt the ice in her heart. He won her over with politeness, care, and the ability to hold a conversation. Sarah responded to his courtship, but she also understood that the emergence of sympathy was influenced by the fear of remaining alone. It was no joke. More than 10 years had passed since the betrayal. Sally probably married Arthur only because he was the complete opposite of David, both in appearance and character, but still, their life together didn't work out. Sarah wanted to leave unnoticed, but suddenly Lisa shifted her attention from the almost crying Emmy to her and, no less loudly, though with greater joy, cried out, "Sal, damn it. Exactly, Sal, it's you. And I was looking, thinking it was her, then not. Well, I'll be. Good for you, you've hardly changed. Just your eyes look a bit tired. Why are you standing on the doorstep like a stranger? Come in." Almost knocking over Emily, who was standing in front of her, Lisa grabbed her old acquaintance by the wrist, since she had bags in her hands, and pulled her inside the house. Come in quickly. Let's sit and talk. We haven't seen each other in so many years. As you can see, I already have 4. How about you?" Sarah was in shock because she suddenly realized Lisa wasn't bothered by even a shadow of shame for what had happened between them in the past. "What are you staring at?" the hostess snapped at her older children. "Max, take Alice to the playroom and put her in the playpen. Sophie, Emily, hurry to the kitchen. Quickly peel the potatoes, put the water on. I'll have a separate talk with you, Emily. You'll answer for the money you messed up. Just look at that. I sent you a grown-up on such an important errand and you ruined everything. Now you'll just sit here eating potatoes and pasta." No matter how Sarah tried to explain to her sworn friend that she didn't have time, that she had to go home, her words seemed not to reach Lisa. As soon as the peeled tubers were in the boiling water, the mother shouted at the older ones, "All right, out of here quickly. Sit in the playroom and not a sound. Don't bother me and Sally talking." "See?" Lisa turned to her guest. "4 children, and I have to be a commander, otherwise there's no saving them. On top of everything, they're all different ages. Sophie is 14, Emily is 12, Max is 5, and Lily will be 2 soon. They all need different kinds of supervision." The atmosphere in the kitchen was unpleasant and not at all conducive to conversation. Although Sally was not a spoiled lady and could comfortably live in a much smaller space, here she felt unbearably uncomfortable. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink and on the table. A sour smell evoked unpleasant associations with a full garbage can, which seemed to be somewhere in the kitchen. Catching her unexpected guest's gaze, the hostess explained, "The nearby construction damaged the water pipe, so I'm waiting for them to fix it. Then I'll make Sophie and Emily wash everything. To cook and wash our hands, we carry water from the standpipe on the next street." As if hypnotized, Sarah sat on the uncomfortable stool and looked at Lisa, not understanding how she had turned from a real beauty into a coarse, market-type woman. The woman laughed loudly, throwing her head back, and talked breathlessly. "Oh, Sal, you should thank me forever for getting rid of such a gem as Davy. I thought his father was a military man, would retire soon, they'd get an apartment, and we'd settle down somewhere nice. Ah, everything was so neat in my plans. But Dave managed to have a big fight with his father. As a result, with a baby, Sophie wasn't 6 months old, we ended up in a rented room. Dave freaked out, started drinking, even cheated. What can I say? We rushed into starting a family. We were completely green. In bed, he was still all right. It was somehow normal, but there was nothing to talk about. Dave seemed to even treat me with contempt, first with hints, and then he started saying directly that I had brazenly trapped him, completely tied his hands and feet, as if he were a dog on a leash, going wherever he was pulled. Utterly surprised, Sarah didn't even know what to say to such revelations. But Lisa apparently just needed to talk. She continued her speech, not noticing that her guest was completely uncomfortable listening to her. Anyway, pretty soon, out of boredom and spite, I started having fun with the neighbor. Everything seemed to be going well, and then somehow we got caught. Davy got nervous, started throwing punches at me. My lover, sensing trouble, ran off, his heels flashing. Dave filed for divorce, and I didn't resist. He turned out not to be so good after all. All I could get from him was alimony. He has to pay for both Sophie and Emily, who was supposedly conceived during our marriage. Honestly, I don't even know who she really is. As luck would have it, I'm having temporary problems with my card. I sent that idiot out for cash today. She lost it. And she's left without a phone, too. Max and Alice are from my current husband, but he's practically useless. Doesn't come home for days. When he does, there's not much joy either. But they promised to give us a new apartment soon. We recently moved here, sort of following Dave, to get all sorts of extra bonuses besides alimony. He's doing well, the scoundrel. Found a woman who got him a cushy job. The official salary is peanuts, but the under-the-table amount in an envelope every month makes him happy. I know this for sure because an acquaintance works there too. Anyway, Davy isn't exactly against helping voluntarily, but he avoids it in every way. So I have to send the girls to him. He gives in when they start begging. Of course, I rushed things, basically gave birth to Sophie and Emily for free. But with Max, it worked out perfectly, as if we specifically planned this whole maternity capital thing for him. It's a shame it's not cash, but at least something from a lousy, excuse my language, sheep, at least a tuft of wool. Lisa looked around and didn't see any clean dishes except for a tray with a decorative samovar. She quickly moved it to the dirty floor and transferred the cooked potatoes to the freed-up plate. After that, with a practiced, swift movement, she took clearly used disposable cups from the cupboard and poured a cloudy liquid from a bottle into them. "Don't be squeamish, Sal. This is a drink made by my man. I vouch for the quality. It drinks like water, and your head won't ache in the morning. Let's have a shot now, and you tell me how you're living, what you're up to, where you work. Why should I talk only about myself? Listen, do you have children? By your figure, it looks like you don't. But don't delay. I'm only half a year older, and you see what a set I have. Well, aren't I great?" Without waiting for her guest's answer, Lisa confirmed, Of course I'm great. Don't think I'm boasting. It's just that if you don't praise yourself, you absolutely have to praise yourself. That's it. I made it in time. Look there. Sophie is almost a bride already, and I'm still quite young. Isn't that cool? And it's time for you too, Sal. It's time to have children. Your biological clock is ticking. And before you know it, old age will be at your doorstep. And you're all alone. So run and find a man and give birth. Or, if you want, I'll call Dave right now and tell him you need help with such a delicate matter. I think he won't refuse. He'll help. Then he won't interfere. The baby will be only yours, with no claims from his side. Otherwise, his shrew of a wife will quickly deal with him. And Dave isn't stupid enough to ruin a profitable marriage. Well, shall I call? Sarah felt murky inside, from the unsolicited advice, the dubious offer, and the unwelcome encounter with the brazen, unprincipled Lisa in general. How dare she give advice, living in such a pigsty? Sarah physically felt like she was suffocating in this environment and, as if waking from a stupor, wanted to tell her former friend everything she thought. However, she was interrupted by Emmy's timid voice from behind her. Mom, can I put aside some potatoes for us? Max is asking for food, and I haven't eaten anything substantial since morning. Sarah got up from the stool, freeing up the space. Thank you for the offer, Lisa, but I really have to go. Besides, your children probably need to go to bed. Lisa was clearly displeased that her second daughter had interrupted their chat. Sarah noticed that her former friend was barely restraining herself from swearing. By the door stood the bags with the harvest collected at the dacha. Feeling a strange sense of pity, Sally took out her handbag with keys and wallet and said, This, Lisa, is vitamins for your children. Goodbye. The woman left her former friend's house and, reaching the next one, leaned against a tree on the sidewalk. Memories surged like dirty waves, filling her thoughts. How she had hated Lisa and David then, wishing them all sorts of misfortunes. Now, by chance, she had seen how the betrayer lived, but she felt no joy. She felt sorry primarily for the children, and, honestly, even for David and Lisa, for whom she had once devised the most elaborate punishments. Sarah, called Emmy, who had caught up with the woman. You didn't give me your number. Please, here's a piece of paper and a pen. Write it down for me. Although Sarah had no desire to communicate with anyone connected to Lisa, she, tired and morally drained, complied with the girl's request. Emmy smiled, her white teeth flashing in the dim light, and asked, Can I call you sometimes when I have a phone again? Sally nodded and advised, Run home. You've had a difficult day, eat something and go to bed. The girl waved and ran home. Sarah waited until the door closed behind Emmy and hurried to her own place. The late hour left no chance that public transport was still running through the city streets. She needed to get out of the construction-filled area quickly and hurry to get to her own apartment, to finally rest from the unexpected events. Surprisingly, the woman reached home safely, as if under the wing of a guardian angel, and, after taking a shower, went to bed. Whether it was nervous strain or the prolonged rest at the dacha, sleep did not come to Sarah. She counted sheep and used other techniques, but nothing helped. Events of the past surfaced in her memory, mixing together. The woman couldn't understand if Lisa felt no remorse at all for having crossed the line of decency once upon a time. Of course, it was impossible to say how things would have turned out with David, but there was still a chance that everything would have worked out well. Maybe they would have had children? A separate cause for anxiety was the fact that the betrayers now lived in the same city as her. Although it was large, the probability of a chance encounter increased. Why on earth did I stay late at the dacha, and then notice the sad girl and help her? If I had known in advance whose daughter Emmy was, I would have walked past or just given her money for a ticket. It's really true. No good deed goes unpunished. Accompanied by these stinging, uncomfortable, provoking thoughts, Sarah finally fell into a restless sleep. The early summer morning still offered coolness, but by all appearances the day was going to be hot again. Thanks to the sudden work troubles, Sarah didn't even remember the meeting the day before, but in the evening, during her traditional phone call with her mother, sadness washed over Sarah again. Not immediately, and softening the impression of the meeting with her former friend a little, she told her everything. Martha was categorical. Daughter, you have grown into a wonderful, compassionate person. But remember, when you extend a helping hand, it's important to dodge the kick and return in time. Sweet Sally, I beg you, don't pity that Lisa. She chose her own fate. It's not your fault that she has 4 children now. You left them berries, and that's enough. No more acts of support from you. Even for the sake of the children, you shouldn't pity Lisa. They are, of course, innocent, but for your own happiness, you need to stay away from such sworn friends. If I understand anything in this life, it's unlikely she could have changed for the better. Forget about her and don't remember her. And if she shows up, chase her away with a broom. It's a shame, of course, that you gave her daughter your number, but I understand you. You were tired, confused. However, it's nothing. If Lisa has the nerve to call, you'll block her number. And that's all there is to it. The less you associate with such people, the better. You can't expect anything good from wicked betrayers. Sarah promised her mother that she would under no circumstances respond kindly to Lisa's attempts to reconnect, and she calmed down a little. In fact, her conscience, Sarah's conscience, was clear. She helped the girl selflessly, from the heart, and that was that. Perhaps if she had known that by walking her home she would run into her former friend, she would have parted ways with the girl, by the way, at the corner of the street and just watched her enter the door. However, everything happened as it did, and therefore there is no need to speculate about how it would have been if this or that had happened. Moreover, this act does not place any responsibility for Lisa's children on her. She is not an angel, not a saint, not a blessed one. She certainly will not be able to graciously forgive a betrayal, even one from 15 years ago. She is not going to seek revenge either. There's no need to soil her hands or conscience. And honestly, it is healed. At first, the pain was so strong that she could barely breathe, but she endured, survived, rebuilt herself, pulling herself out from under the rubble of what was, on her part, a great and bright love. Now, she has no desire to communicate with dishonest people who unexpectedly surfaced from the past. Sally's mother returned from the sanatorium, and everything in the small, friendly Miller family returned to normal. The sincere joy of meeting a loved one was mutual. Together, the women celebrated this not-so-grand but important event at their beloved dacha, and life continued in its usual pattern. The rest of the summer passed calmly. For a while, the woman cautiously answered calls from unknown numbers, fearing she would hear Emmy's voice, but then this fear also subsided. Golden autumn generously bestowed a harvest of apples, and to Sarah's great joy, neither Lisa nor David appeared on the horizon. With some trepidation, she walked past the plot where she had once met her sworn friend's daughter, but then this feeling also became a thing of the past, especially after Sarah met Alexander. It happened near the bus stop. The man in a simple domestic car slowed down, seeing two women slowly dragging trolleys, and offered them a ride. If Martha hadn't felt unwell that evening due to the change in weather, turning towards real autumn, she would surely have found a reason to refuse such kindness. However, Sarah took it upon herself to answer and, thanking the driver for his concern, helped her mother into the car. By this time, the bags were already in the trunk, carefully placed by the sympathetic man. On the way, the driver introduced himself and even, taking a wrist blood pressure monitor from the glove compartment, offered it to Martha. Just in case, measure your pressure. Maybe it makes sense to stop by a hospital or pharmacy. The readings were quite acceptable. The man, after asking for the address of his new acquaintances, soon drove Martha and Sarah to their building entrance, and then helped carry the bags into the apartment. Alexander declined the offered tea, but gratefully accepted a bag of apples. In addition, the man asked Sarah for her phone number. They started dating, and Alexander gradually became part of the small female kingdom. He helped as much as he could, both at the dacha and in the apartment, although both Martha and Sarah tried not to burden him with problems. However, he categorically rejected their attempts to pay him for his work. Only one thing made Martha uneasy. The man was very reticent about himself. Alexander described his life in dotted lines, schematically and without details. Born in one of the Soviet republics, then forced to leave with his family, trained as a car mechanic, got a job, then was drafted for compulsory service, served in a hot spot, returned, married, divorced, no children, works, lives in a rented apartment, but is already looking for an apartment to mortgage. When asked about his relatives, he would shut down and ask, "Let's wait until I'm ready. I'll tell you everything myself." Sarah, unrestrained in her fantasies, decided that a terrible tragedy had occurred in Alexander's past, which was still painful and difficult for him to remember. Martha felt a slight distrust towards the new acquaintance. He had found common ground with her daughter too easily. Alexander liked the same music and movies as Sarah. He could easily finish a sentence she started, and often completely agreed with any opinion she expressed. The man didn't rush things, but at the same time, he became more firmly established in Sarah's life. It reached the point where he would drive her to work, pick her up, and take her to the Dacha and back. At first, Martha accepted the man good-naturedly, but gradually her gratitude for his help turned into apprehension. Alexander began to seem too smooth to her, too polite, always neat, without the slightest trace of working in a car service. She never saw any marks on his hands, like her ex-husband's, and his constant desire to control all of Sarah's movements caused a burning feeling of anxiety. One day, Martha decided to share her suspicions with her daughter. "Sally, listen to me calmly. This Alexander is too perfect. Everything seems smooth and consistent, but just think. When does he have time to work if he's practically become your personal driver? And on a voluntary basis. Forgive me, but I absolutely don't believe in altruism in the modern world. Maybe you're secretly giving him money for gas at least?" Sarah was even a little offended. "So, just like that, for free? Because he likes me, driving me around. That's not an option." After a pause, the young woman tried to soften the sharpness of her phrase and, as if surprised, admitted, "Actually, Mom, I offered Alex to pay for expenses, but he flatly refused. I think you're just worrying unnecessarily. Haven't we deserved to meet a good, selfless person?" Martha herself wanted to believe in a miracle, but she tried to convince her daughter not to rush into opening her heart to Alexander. "That's right. You definitely deserve happiness. But don't rush. Think it over calmly yourself. He doesn't reveal any details about his life, any emotions about past or present situations. When I start asking him questions, he evades answers or says what we've already heard, like an actor who has memorized his lines and sticks to them without any improvisation. He's never lost his temper, never said anything extra. Okay, I understand. It might be hard to remember military actions, but why is he so reserved about everything else?" Sarah just grimaced at such complaints. "Mom, nothing pleases you. Remember, you told me about Arthur that he was too talkative, too evasive. Alex is reserved, quiet, and again, it's not right for you." Martha herself regretted starting this conversation with her daughter and certainly didn't expect it to lead to a quarrel, splitting their seemingly unshakable understanding. Sarah went to her room, showing that she did not intend to continue the conversation. And her mother thought, maybe she really wasn't entirely objective about Alexander. Indeed, there was a possibility that he was a man of action, not inclined to talk about himself. And did her suspicions arise from maternal jealousy? No, Martha decided. I won't interfere in my daughter's relationship with her chosen one anymore. However, I will watch carefully so as not to miss any alarming signs. So what if sweet Sally is in her 4th decade? To me, she will always remain my beloved little girl, whom I will always protect. The woman's doubts did not disappear, but now she stopped bothering her daughter with her conjectures. However Martha felt about Alexander, she couldn't deny that preparing the dacha for winter would have been much more difficult without his help. The man diligently fulfilled all requests and even made reasonable suggestions himself. He clearly had experience with such work. But Alex again elegantly evaded the question of where he had learned all the intricacies of dacha farming. About a week before the new year, the man brought a slender fir tree with fluffy short needles to the miller's apartment, explaining, "I thought that you grow flowers yourselves at the dacha, and it would be silly to give you Dutch equivalents, and this seems more thematic." Sally, placing the fragrant beauty in a free corner, asked, "And what exactly is the occasion for giving flowers today, which of course are less impressive than a fir tree?" A hint of offense sounded in Alexander's voice. "What, Sally? Don't you remember that today is exactly 3 months since our accidental but such happy meeting? It became a very important event for me." Sarah was even embarrassed. "Forgive me, Alex. We have a mad rush at the firm before the new year, so it completely slipped my mind. You're not offended?" The man smiled and admitted, "Not a bit. I read somewhere that offense is for chambermaids. So, my dear, I'm not even annoyed. Really, I just wanted to do something nice for you, and since I happened to pass a Christmas tree market, I thought a fir tree would be perfect." Martha, listening to the conversation between her daughter and her suitor, felt ashamed of her doubts about Alexander. He spoke so unconvincingly. Besides, the man calmly agreed to spend the holiday with Sarah and her mother. In part, Martha's suspicions that Alexander was married disappeared. Could a married man so easily free himself from the obligation of being home at a set table with relatives? Hardly. On the holiday evening, Alexander gave Martha a beautiful shawl in the Pavlov posad style and presented Sarah with perfume. 15 minutes before midnight, the man asked for a little attention and delivered an unusually long speech for him. Dear Martha and Sarah, in the past year, the most significant event for me was meeting you by chance. I think it was the greatest luck in my life. Essentially, only thanks to you did I understand what true family support and the warmth of home mean. I would like Sarah to enter the coming year in a new status. Excuse me, I'm nervous. The man cleared his throat and then addressed Sally's mother. Martha, I ask for your daughter's hand. Believe me, she will have no reason to be dissatisfied with me. Do you approve? Martha looked at her daughter questioningly, at her happy eyes that sparkled brighter than the lights on the Christmas tree, and shrugged. I think, Alexander, you should ask her too. No, however she decides, that's how it will be. Alexander nodded in agreement with the woman's words, took a small box from his pocket, and opening it, showed it to Sarah. Allow me to put it on you as a sign of our engagement. Sally smiled timidly, extending her hand to the man, and the moved Martha wiped the corners of her eyes, trying not to smudge her mascara. At the holiday table, Alexander began suggesting options for the celebration. I think it makes sense to choose a wedding date closer to summer. Have a meal at a cafe and then go relax at your wonderful dacha, Martha. Thanks in part to which we met. After that, frankly, I'd like to go somewhere by the sea for a week or two. What do you think about that, Sarah? Will you be able to take time off work in the summer? Sarah beamed and was already mentally calculating which period to ask her boss for, and then she suddenly remembered, Mom, how will you manage the dacha in my absence? Martha waved her hands. Don't you worry, the dacha should be a pleasure, not a chore. Plan your celebration however it's convenient for you. By the way, Alexander, we should probably inform your family about such an important event, and it wouldn't hurt to meet them in general. From Alexander's sharply saddened face, it was clear that Martha had touched upon a sore subject, but he replied, Alas, I have no one to introduce you to. I'm sorry, but this is a somewhat painful topic for me. I'll go get some air on the landing. The man left the table and Sally indignantly whispered to her mother, Why did you spoil Alex's mood? Everything was so wonderful. He seems to have some unpleasant memories associated with the loss of loved ones. We already talked about this somehow. Martha began to apologize. Daughter, but I didn't mean to offend Alexander. That's it. I won't ask another single question. Don't worry. When Alexander returned to the table, he acted as if nothing had happened, and the holiday returned to a pleasant course. By mutual decision, it was decided to register the marriage in the spring, in April, and postpone the honeymoon until the velvet season. The days of the new year flew by. Alexander even started taking Sarah to look at apartments. However, among the abundance of options, they couldn't find the perfect one. Martha was happy for her daughter, but made another attempt to verify Alexander's identity. The man's social media page was boring and lacked hints of relatives. He published photos of cars he had repaired and reposted contest entries. The woman noticed nothing suspicious and calmly began preparing for her daughter's upcoming wedding. One day, Alexander, as usual, picked Sarah up from work, and the woman noticed that her fiancé was even more taciturn than usual. Watching him from the passenger seat, she saw how the man's brows were furrowed and how his jaw muscles twitched. The atmosphere in the car was tense, and unable to bear it, she asked, Alex, what's going on? Has something happened? Can I help in any way? The man turned off the avenue into a shopping center parking lot, stopped the car, and turned to Sarah. Alexander's expression was not at all like that of a happy groom preparing to say goodbye to bachelorhood. After a pause, he spoke. Sally, I have serious problems. We might have to postpone the wedding. They? Sarah asked, frightened. What happened? Alexander, looking into his fiancé's eyes, shared his problems. To earn more money besides my usual garage service, I started working for cash at another place. Well, last night the bays where cars brought for repair were parked, to which I had access, and some I even repaired burned down. In short, they decided to blame me for the fire. The amount I have to pay is astronomical. I've already given all my savings, but it's a drop in the ocean. I've been running around banks all day, but with the salary I can show officially, there are no decent offers. They're threatening to cripple me, even find other ways to influence me. I'm terribly afraid that you or your mother might suffer because of these bastards. Sarah was in shock. She had seen a report about the fire in the industrial zone on a local news website, but she couldn't have imagined that this emergency would affect her so closely. Sarah gently stroked her fiancé's cheek in a calming gesture and tried to speak absolutely calmly. This isn't a disaster. We won't postpone anything. I'll transfer money from my card to you right now so you can at least pay off part of the debt. We'll go file the application exactly on the day we planned and get married without involving a crowd or delays. The only thing is, we'll have to sacrifice the entertainment. But that's not scary at all. We can easily do without a banquet and a trip to the sea. Life is long. We'll have time for everything. Alexander grabbed Sarah's hand and began showering it with kisses. Thank you, my dear, for your support. We'll see. Maybe the insurance company will sort it out and the claims against me will be dropped. Of course, that would be the best option. Well, roughly knowing how this insurance business works, they'll most likely refuse to pay, or it will come in a few years. So it's better not to count on it to avoid disappointment. The couple sat in the car for a little longer, and then Alexander drove his fiancée home. He flatly refused to stop by. Forgive me, my dear, I'm going to run to another place right now. Maybe I can pick up some extra work there. Every penny counts for us now. Sarah smiled encouragingly and kissing her fiancé asked, Alex, just don't overwork yourself. We'll get through this. Don't break yourself. At home, Sarah told her mother about the trouble Alexander had gotten into and asked, what do you think, maybe we should hire a lawyer to at least try to reduce the amount of damage supposedly caused by Alexander? Martha was shocked. She had been so accustomed by her father, Sarah's grandfather, that a real man tries not to burden the woman close to him with his problems. At the same time, she understood perfectly well that the semi-criminal businessman Alexander was working for could well act by any means, often choosing illegal but most effective ones. For the next few days, Alexander couldn't see his fiancée, which he warned her about by phone. My golden one, I was offered a great paying side job, but I'll have to go out of town, so I'm sorry. I won't be able to get away even to drive you to work and back. Sally took this with complete understanding. She was glad that the man she loved hadn't despaired but was trying to get out of the difficult situation. After a warm farewell to Alexander, she began thinking about how else she could help Alex. Taking advantage of a few days' break, mother and daughter began to collect at least part of the necessary sum. They had bank accounts, and although it wasn't enough, at least the debt would gradually decrease. After withdrawing the money, the women, taking all precautions, brought it home and waited for Alex's appearance. The man called a couple of days later, and Sally joyfully informed him that she and her mother had collected another part of the sum. Alexander thanked her tirelessly, and the woman even felt that he was barely holding back tears. Sally, my love, how grateful I am to you and Martha. Most likely, I'll be back in the city the day after tomorrow and can finally hug you. There's also a possibility of selling my car, and if everything goes well, we'll have a little money left for the holiday table. It won't be as luxurious a banquet as I dreamed of giving you, but still. Only after the call ended did Sarah realize how much she missed the man she loved. He had become necessary to her, like air. Although it seemed very little time had passed since they met. Seeing that her daughter was still anxious, Martha tried to redirect her thoughts to something pleasant. Listen, I have a wonderful piece of fabric tucked away. Grandmother Eleanor found it on a special occasion. Let's take a look at it and think about the style of a wedding dress. Sally chuckled. Mom, I'm not getting married for the first time, you know. I don't necessarily need a white dress. Martha countered, well, did I say the fabric was white? It's just a wonderful turquoise shade, which I think... With chores and gentle arguments about the style, the women were somewhat distracted from their unpleasant worries. After all, when your hands and head are busy with a creative process, everything else seems to lose its significance. Martha had gone to the store when Sarah's phone unexpectedly rang with an incoming call from an unknown number. The woman usually declined such calls and did so this time. However, the unknown caller persisted. When the ringtone sounded again, Sally answered. Hello. The young voice coming from the speaker was clear but somehow joyless. Hello, Sarah. It's Emily, Lisa's daughter. Can we meet somewhere crowded now so as not to attract unnecessary attention? Sarah was surprised. She hadn't thought she would ever have to talk to her sworn friend's daughter again, and she replied not very kindly. Maybe you can explain to me on the phone what's going on? The girl's voice turned into a whisper. I can't say this on the phone. Please, let's meet at a shopping center. Sarah gave in, and soon she and Emily arranged to meet at the food court of the shopping center closest to the woman's home. Martha, who had returned home, was surprised that her daughter was going somewhere but didn't question her. In fact, Sally herself couldn't explain what force was pushing her to go to this meeting. She recognized Emily from afar, The girl was again sitting slumped as she had that summer evening, as if weighed down by a difficult, unchildlike problem. Sally approached and greeted her. "Hi, Emily. How are you?" The girl looked up and, greeting her back, blurted out quickly, "Sarah, well, I don't need to explain for long. Don't give Alex any money. He's a Pianzi, Chinese for swindler, deceiver. I should use an English word. He's a swindler." Sarah was astonished. "Why do you think so?" Sarah's eyes widened. She didn't understand what was happening, and she clarified. "Wait, Emily, how do you know Alex is asking me for money? How do you know him?" The girl lowered her gaze and then confessed. "Sarah, well, I'm ashamed to admit it to you, but your meeting with Alex was planned and organized by my mom. She's angry with you for some reason, although, as I understand it, it should be the other way around. So Mom decided to make some money. She said that life is bad without a sucker, and she involved this Alex in her plan. He's somehow connected to my stepfather Thomas, Max, and Alice's father. I don't know exactly where they met, maybe in an orphanage, or maybe when he was serving time as a minor. Anyway, I overheard this cunning scheme yesterday. Alex is supposed to get money from you and disappear. He's already withdrawn the first part from his card. But generally, he and Thomas are sure that you'll be too embarrassed to go to the police. How that pig Thomas was screaming yesterday when Alex told him that you had prepared another sum for him. He told Alex not to rush back, supposedly so you wouldn't think he dropped everything and rushed back just for the money. I thought all night and half the day whether to tell you about this or not, and I decided to tell you. I think you don't deserve such a wicked attitude. After all, you were the only one who didn't pass me by, who responded to my trouble, who treated me to delicious berries. It's wrong when good people are punished by rogues. What happened between my mom and you doesn't concern me. Personally, I haven't experienced anything bad. And in part, I even consider myself guilty of what's happening now, because Mom only started getting angry with you after your meeting." Sarah swallowed the lump that suddenly almost blocked her breath and found the courage to calm the girl. "No, Emily, you are not to blame for anything. For some reason, your mother decided to make me her main enemy, and you are completely uninvolved in this action of hers. Thank you very much for warning me. Otherwise, I would have ended up in a simply catastrophic situation, and I would have dragged my mother into it too. You can rest assured, no one will know that I figured out Alexander with your help. I promise you." Sarah thanked Emily again and somehow, struggling to comprehend the wickedness of her former friend, who harbored resentment for reasons unknown, made her way home. Martha immediately understood that something terrible had happened to her daughter. She looked so lost. Sally emotionlessly recounted everything she had learned about Alexander, his involvement in Lisa and her husband's insidious plan. Martha listened to the shocking information, pressing her hand to her mouth to keep from unleashing justified curses at the scoundrels. Such treachery was very hard to believe. When Sarah fell silent, the woman finally couldn't help herself. "What is going on? Why is that vile Lisa doing this to you? She's been doing wicked things since she was a child, and isn't afraid that the boomerang for evil deeds will come back and hit her on the head? Oh, God, how good it is that Emily crossed your path. Otherwise, if you had accidentally run into Lisa in the city, who would have helped prevent her villainous plan?" Finally, bursting into tears, Sally clung to her mother and whispered hotly, "You were right in your suspicions, and I was blinded by Alexander's care and hoped that here he was, a real, reliable man with whom I could relax, remember my fragility. Even when Arthur told me he was leaving me, it didn't hurt this much. At least he honestly admitted that he loved someone else and couldn't live with me. And this swindler wormed his way into our trust for so many months, lulling our vigilance, deceiving us. How can I trust people now? And, Mom, I don't even regret the money I immediately transferred to him when I learned about his supposed problems. I'm terribly hurt that I was so easily fooled. Why am I such a sucker?" Martha, holding her daughter tightly, as she had when she was a child, tried to speak convincingly and calmly. People with pure souls find it hard to believe that they are surrounded by scoundrels. You are wrong to blame yourself. This Alexander was very convincing. Even I fell for his charm. A talent, albeit a negative one. You know, let's think of the money you transferred to him not as his illegal gain, but as fair payment for his services for repairing the dacha and the apartment. If we look at it from that point of view, we are quite even. So you could say we got off cheaply. We got another lesson. You have to trust your intuition. If there's the slightest suspicion, you need to check all the information more carefully. There were obvious oddities in Alexander's behavior, but we chose to ignore them. We should have insisted that he introduce you to at least some of his relatives or friends. We could have gone to his workplace, visited the hostel where he lives, talked to his neighbors. Martha's reasoning was interrupted by a call. It was Alexander calling Sarah, as was his custom, to wish her good night, say his usual compliments, and declare his love. Only now did the woman understand the true price of these words. It was all lies. Contrary to habit, she didn't rush to answer the man. She simply didn't know how to live on at all and what exactly to say to a person who had taken advantage of her trust and intended to completely fleece her. Sally was afraid that Alexander would realize he had been exposed from her voice. Martha answered instead. "Hello, Alexander." Sally went to the neighbors and forgot her phone. "Can I give her a message?" Alexander, as always, was polite and courteous. "Thank you, Martha. If possible, please ask her to call back any time she returns. I'll be waiting. All the best. Goodbye." The woman echoed the caller. "Goodbye." The conversation ended and Sally looked at her mother with longing and asked, "How can someone lie so skillfully? So polite, simply impeccable. I wanted to shout that they miscalculated and wouldn't get another penny from me or you. But we have to do everything so as not to let Emily down. Judging by how Lisa can cause trouble for strangers, she won't spare her own daughter. It will be bad for her if someone guesses that she warned me. I don't want to harm such a sincere, honest girl." Martha understood that Sarah wasn't expecting an answer, so she didn't rush to say anything. Indeed, they had to think everything through carefully. The women sat embracing, as if drawing support and strength from each other to withstand the betrayal that had fallen upon them. Finally, Martha began to speak, choosing her words carefully. "I think you shouldn't talk to Alexander on the phone today. Write him a text message saying you're tired, especially since it's the pure truth, and that you'll wait for him here, at our place. He's supposed to come tomorrow, Saturday, isn't he?" Sally nodded, and Martha continued to share her plan. "Excellent. So tomorrow morning, you and I will go and deposit the money in the bank. Then I'll ask a colleague to come over as backup. I think if you confidently tell Alexander that you absolutely cannot support him financially anymore, he won't insist or try to influence us in any way. Of course, ideally, we shouldn't bring him home, but meet somewhere in a cafe. Beyond that, personally, I see two options. Either immediately stun him with the news that his scheme has been exposed, but then his reaction could be unpredictable. He might try to fight. It would be a more interesting game if we had a little fun, led Alexander by the nose, lied, for example, that we urgently transferred the money for the treatment of a child seen on television. I think that news would be a terrible blow to him. What do you think?" Anger blazed in Sarah's eyes. "Mom, I have another idea. Remember we had some novelty banknotes lying around somewhere that your colleagues gave you as a joke for your birthday? I suggest we give Alexander a so-called dummy of fake money. I doubt he'll check the authenticity of his gain in front of us. And when he gets back to his lair with them, I wonder how he'll justify himself to his accomplices. I seriously doubt Lisa will believe him if he says he got exactly these papers from me. She thinks I'm a sucker. I think Alex is guaranteed to have problems." Martha approved her daughter's plan. "What a clever idea. I wouldn't have thought of that. But I still absolutely don't want to see him in our apartment. Let's meet him somewhere on the way to the Dacha, and you'll give him the supposed money, and we'll go to the Dacha. Even if there's no work there now, except maybe filling the tank with snow, I think it will be easier for us in the fresh air. Physical labor will help distract us from our thoughts." Sarah agreed and immediately looked sad. "Mom, we probably need to change the locks first thing, just in case. Remember, I gave Alexander a set of keys for both the apartment and the dacha?" The woman responded instantly. "Good thinking, daughter, you're right. I'll call Walter right now and ask him to help." While Martha was making arrangements with her colleague, Sally watched with unexpected joy how sweetly her mother's cheeks blushed during what seemed like a completely serious, not romantic conversation. Let at least she be lucky in love, the woman thought. Mom deserves to have happiness come her way too. Otherwise, I can't understand where the justice is in life. It didn't take Walter long to get to his colleague's apartment, and soon he was tackling the task. Observing the working man and her mother from the corner of her eye, Sally clearly noticed that there was a strong mutual sympathy between them. Walter didn't refuse dinner in the hospitable apartment and agreed to go to the dacha together the next morning. Martha briefly, without details, told him about the upcoming event, and the man said sternly, "Excellent plan. But just for good measure, I would also file a police report for fraud by trust. At least maybe these swindlers are wanted for other crimes. And besides, even if they aren't held accountable, at least it will rattle their nerves, and that's something. After Martha saw her guest out, Sally asked her mother, "Did you notice the way Walter was looking at you?" The woman visibly blushed. "Oh, don't be silly. We're just friends. Although, of course, I like him very much, but I've somehow gotten used to living without a man in my space. I even recall with horror what it was like. Constantly ironing shirts, searching for matching socks, cooking huge pots of food. That kind of self-sacrifice is only possible when there is love or a strong financial motivation. Why are you looking at me like that, daughter?" Alas, in the modern world, financial support is an excellent fertilizer. So to speak, you can grow a perfectly happy partnership on it. Forgive me for the gardening comparison. Sally even laughed. Mom! I thought you were a romantic lady, but you're a practical and rational gardener. However, I would strongly advise you to take a closer look at Walter. Of course, my intuition isn't great, but he seemed very pleasant, sincere, and in love with you. The women carefully thought through all the details of the upcoming prank on the exposed swindler, who didn't yet know about his failure, and Sarah began typing a message. Alexander's reply didn't take long. "Can't wait for tomorrow. I want to see you so much. Kisses, my love. Can't wait to see and hug you." "And we can't wait either," Martha snorted. "This meeting is definitely going to be unforgettable." Sarah, Martha, and Walter met in advance. The man told them what he had managed to find out through acquaintances. No work was being done on cars in the burned-down garages. This argument was important so that none of the swindlers would think that someone from Lisa's family had told Sarah about the deception. The fighters for justice arrived at the bus stop where the transfer of the fake money was supposed to take place a little earlier. But Alexander, anticipating a big score, also arrived ahead of time. He had to park his car a little further away to avoid arguments with traffic police. Alexander practically ran towards his waiting fiancée and her companions. After greeting the stranger cordially, the groom leaned his lips against his fiancée's cheek, kissed Martha's hand, and, luckily, didn't notice how the women grimaced. Then Alex received a small package from Sarah's hands. "Darling, here's everything Mom and I managed to collect. We simply have nowhere else to get more, unless we put the apartment or the dacha up for sale." Alexander again rushed to kiss Martha's hand. "Martha, I appreciate your kindness, but you don't need to make such sacrifices for me, especially since with this sum, I'll be able to satisfy the main part of the claim. Listen, maybe I should write you a receipt." Summoning all her self-control, the woman replied, "What are you talking about, sweet Alex? What kind of receipts can there be between close people? You're going to become part of our family. I intend to entrust you with my most precious possession, my only daughter." What are some papers compared to her? Consider this our common family budget, and to get you out of trouble, we are ready to give everything we have. Money is just paper compared to your health. And ours too, by the way. In the notorious 90s, you could even lose your life for smaller debts. We are absolutely not willing to do that. So go, settle with those bastards, and come to the dacha. We'll light a fire, boil tea in the pot, and relax after all these worries. Alexander hugged his fiancée, shook Walter's hand, and hurried to his car. Sarah and Martha, without speaking, sighed in unison. They had played out the invented revenge scene with such precision, as if they had held numerous rehearsals. Martha giggled. "I can just imagine the swearing match that will start when those who decided to fool us discover a dummy instead of real money." Sally supported her mother. "Exactly. It's a shame we won't be able to see their faces." Walter, watching his amused companions, suggested, "Well, to the dacha or to the police station to file a report on this gang?" Martha, exchanging glances with her daughter, voiced their shared decision. "To the dacha, of course. We discussed this situation all night, searched for similar cases online to understand the prospects of punishment for these fraudsters. The results weren't very encouraging. Sarah transferred the money to a private individual voluntarily, without coercion. Proving that this Alex deceived my daughter about his difficult situation will be almost impossible. So we'll just watch and see what this Alex says and does when he discovers the bills are fake." The call from Alexander came almost immediately after the trio of inventive avengers reached the dacha plot. Sarah took the call, putting her smartphone on speakerphone. Everyone prepared to listen to the hapless swindler. "Sweet Sally, my dear, such a problem has happened. Did you get the money at the bank?" Sally tried to put a note of anxiety in her voice and asked, "Yes, I got the money at the bank branch, the one in the next building on the ground floor. What happened?" Alex continued to clarify, "Sally, did you and your mother count the money?" The woman was indignant. "Of course. What if there was some technical error, a malfunction of that machine that counts money? We counted everything thoroughly. Then, as I told you, I put everything in the bag. What happened?" The man didn't answer and didn't give up, trying to find out the truth. "Sally, my love, did you accidentally leave the bag anywhere? Maybe you went into a store?" Martha and Walter could barely restrain themselves from laughing, and Sally continued to coolly mock the deceiver who had fallen into a trap. "Oh, how awful. How could that happen, darling? Listen, maybe you could bring me that bag right now and I'll take it to the police? Let them take, what do you call it, fingerprints? How do they do it, fatty traces, like in the TV shows? They'll isolate them and determine who else touched the bag besides me?" There was no sound from the speaker. It seemed Alex was conferring with Lisa and Thomas through gestures, and after a few seconds he said, "Listen, in anger and confusion I tore the bag to shreds. Now, probably there won't be anyone's traces there except mine. It's unlikely the police will be able to help even if they can. It will take them ages to investigate this case. I have to pay the debt. I promised to settle as much as possible today. My God, what should I do now?" Sarah, wiping away tears, replied coldly, "I'll tell you what to do, Alex. Forget about me forever and don't even think about doing wicked things, keeping in mind that I will still go to the police and file a report about the attempted fraud. Do you think it was so hard to check if you worked in that burned-down garage? You didn't even show up there once. So, goodbye, Alex. Thank you for the lesson. Keep the money I transferred to you for your efforts. You worked on me for a long time, inventively. You earned it in a way." Towards the end of her speech, Sarah's nerves began to fail, and she hurried to hang up, not listening to any of Alex's excuses, who began shouting that she had simply misunderstood him. With a calm heart, the woman blocked the number of her now definitely ex-fiancé and suggested to her mother and Walter, "I think we handled that perfectly. We have a reason to celebrate the victory of justice and my liberation." Martha modestly added, "Daughter, there's another reason. Walter and I have decided to get married." At her mother's wedding, Sarah met Oliver, the nephew of the elegant groom. Their relationship developed with Martha's full approval. Sally, who now relied unconditionally on her mother's opinion, allowed herself to trust a man again. It wasn't very easy, but life went on, and there was no reason to isolate herself in loneliness because of the scoundrel she had encountered. 6 months later, Oliver proposed to Sarah, and she accepted. The story with the wicked Lisa and the swindler Alexander remained in the past. The only person the woman wished happiness for was Emily, who had helped her get out of a nearly hopeless situation.